The biggest issue that some producers face is that sometimes we get stuck at 8-bar loops or at the end of the drop, and we don't know what to do with this. We get stuck. The problem with getting stuck at this stage is that we can't move forward, and that is not fun. Sometimes that even leads us to quit the song, and that's not what you want. Therefore, today I made an 8-bar loop, and we're going to make it into a full song with 5 steps that you can apply to your tracks right now. And I'm sure that these will help you avoid getting stuck on your songs as well. Let's go down to Ableton and let's get started with tip number 1. Shall we? Let's go. So tip number 1, when making an 8-bar loop, make the fullest 8-bar loop of the drop first. Often when I started my songs, I had no idea how I was going to go with it. And that's partially because I didn't have a vision for the song. But not only this, another thing was I just simply had no idea how to progress with the song. So instead of progressing with the song, I inverted my process and started with the fullest 8-bar of the song. So instead of moving forwards, now I have to move backwards. Instead of building, I have to deconstruct my drop, and essentially that made my process a lot easier. For example, let's go down here to Ableton. We have this 8-bar loop over here. I made this 8-bar especially for this video, but now how can we make the start of the drop? Let's say that this was the third 8-bar of the drop. Okay, if this was the third 8-bar of the drop, how can we start this? So we're going to start with a kick, likely. So I'm going to copy the kick. We're going to probably start with the bass as well. So I'm going to copy the bass. This is what we have at the moment. Let's add some effects to it as well. Maybe some claps. Maybe some shakers to give a little bit of groove to it. Not this one, not tambourines, I want shakers. Maybe with an ARP first. And we're probably gonna do some automation to it. What else can we add over here? Possibly these bass shots over here as well. Maybe some piano loops. I'm kind of missing some percussion, so I'm gonna add some bongos. But that's good enough. That's good enough for the start of the drop, because now we have something to move forwards with. We have an idea of how to start. We have an idea of where we want to go. Now let's talk a little bit about tip number 2. Tip number 2 is actually that we have to arrange the full song with the help of a reference track. In the recent video, I showed you how you can reference tracks to get an idea of how you can arrange your songs and how lengthy your sections can be. For example, in that video, I showed that Nora En Pure's tracks drop 1 was 32 bars, and every 8-bar loop, something new happened. So if we go here to Ableton again, we have 32 bars over here. We have the first 8-bar, the second 8-bar, the third, and the fourth. That's 32. The break in Ben Bomer's track in that song was 32 bars as well, and the drop 2 was 32 bars. So again, we're going to apply the same thing over here. 32 bars over here, and 32 bars over here. And essentially we have our radio edit of the song. But now let's keep on going with this song. Now that we know that 32 bars is our drop 1. We have the verse number 3 over here. Now, how can we fill up this middle part? Well, essentially the middle part was going to be the same thing as the initial one, but with a few more things. So what we're going to do over here is copy this, but we're going to add a little bit more elements to make it a little bit more interesting. So we're going to start over here with this. We're probably going to copy this, the vocal ad-libs, and add this in the beginning over here. We're probably going to add these vocals in the beginning because I thought it was a little bit too empty over there as well. But possibly filtered. Let's do it over here. And we're going to make a progression. We're going to make it become a little bit bigger. And we have to make it grow something over here in the 8-bar number 2. Maybe we add some hats. maybe more percussions as well. Maybe this as well. And maybe we can start adding the pads as well from this song. So maybe we can add the ARP as well. But again, let's start making some filters to make it always grow and make it always develop. More ambiances. We come with a lead over here in the drop too, so how can we introduce this lead over here? Possibly we can make it start over here also, but we're gonna automate it in. Maybe more. Well, the last part of the 8-bar loop, we can simply copy it and maybe just take the kick out of it. So we do a transition to the break over here. Maybe adding a snare roll. Well, now we have our drop 1, and now we're gonna move into the break. How can we move into the break? Let's go to tip number 3 so we can keep on going with this tutorial. Tip number 3 is that you need to tell a story within the arrangement of your song. What story are you trying to tell to your listeners through your song? As with any book, film, or song, there is a story that that producer is trying to tell you, and normally that comes with a main character that is driving the listeners through the story. For example, in this song that we're working on right now, there is the lead. And the vocal, they are driving the listener to keep on listening to the song. However, if we took both of these elements out, the song easily becomes lifeless. It doesn't have anything that attaches you to the song. For example, let's listen to this song over here from Scores. The moment that the vocal comes in, you instantly forget about the bass line and all the atmosphere that was there before. However, if you didn't have that vocal, and then we move to the second A bar over here of the song, and everything is just the same. If it's just the same, the song becomes a little bit pointless. It becomes a bit without any purpose. And that's definitely not what you want. We want to achieve something that drives the listener through the song. And for that, in this song, we have that main lead and that main vocal over here. So that's why it's really important to have this main story, because without the main story, there's not a reason for me to keep on listening to the song. And without that main story, I probably wouldn't know how to progress from this section to the break. Now that I know this, let's go to tip number 4 and let's get started in the break of the song. Tip number 4 is that we need to keep the story going in the break, but we also have to make it interesting enough to keep the listener hooked. Now that we know what we have to focus ourselves on, it's time to move along to the break. And that's the part where a lot of producers get stuck and don't know how to move from. However, the easiest way to move from the drop to the break is simply by keeping the same vibe and just changing some things so it makes it a little bit more interesting. At the same time, we have to keep on building and making it more interesting, as I've just said it. And we can't use the same elements all over the same things. Therefore, for the break, I normally try to apply 3 rules that I normally apply to all my song. 1, we have to introduce the main character of the song, which is the lead and the vocal. 2, we have to make this interesting enough, so changing some elements or changing the progression is always a good way to change things up in the song and make it more interesting. And 3, we have to build it to the most exciting part of the song, which is drop 2. So we can't leave it all the way down along the whole progression of the break. Let's go to Ableton and let's talk business about this. So we have this over here. Let's keep on going with the ambiences of the vocal and with the effects. And also let's keep on going with the ARP. And let's keep on going with the chords that we have. But let's change things up and let's use a different progression over here, a different set of chords. Maybe even some strings as well. Now we have to keep on building. And as I said before, we have to keep on growing this, and every 8-bar loop, something new has to happen. So we're going to duplicate this, and we're going to add more elements in this. Maybe we're going to add more percussions. Maybe the tambourine now. And the claps. Possibly we can introduce the vocal over here as well. And maybe the bass. Now we have to duplicate this again, and I feel that it's time to introduce the main lead to the song right now. So we're gonna duplicate this again, add more percussion, so possibly this one that we had before as well, and the main lead again. We're reconnecting the song to what we had before in the break, but at the same time, we're making it different enough because we changed some of the elements that weren't there in the drop. But now we have to keep on building and going to drop 2, which is tip number 5, and let's go to it. Tip number 5 is that you have to make your drop 2 more interesting than the drop 1. Otherwise, what's the point of listening to it? What is the point of listening to drop 2 if it's exactly the same as drop 1? How can you make your song more interesting by making the drop 2 more interesting than the drop 1? And there's a lot of ways that you can do it. The idea here is always to give a listener a reason to keep on listening. So for example, one thing that I love doing over here when I'm working on Ableton, I just go and copy and paste the main section of drop 1. And now we have something like this, which is the same thing as what we had over here. But what if we, 1, add a few more elements than what we had before? So for example, what if we do something like this and add some rides and also a 1-note string over here? Again, when we compare it to drop 1, maybe we can add some effects as well. So what if we do something like this? The other thing that you can do to make your drop more interesting is actually opening the cutoff of your elements. So for example, we have this lead over here. What if we open the cutoff over here and make it a lot bigger? Same thing with the ARP. What if we open the cutoff of the ARP? Or even push some of the elements. Again, if we compare it to drop 1, We already made the song a lot more interesting just by adding 2 more elements and also by changing the cutoff and boosting a little bit of the high end of some of the elements. This way, we give the listener a reason to keep on listening to the song because the drop 2 is different than the drop 1. And in addition to that, we are also keeping the vibe and keeping the lead and that vocal the main character of our songs. Now you just have to keep on going with the song, maybe add a counter lead just so it's not so repetitive, but always keep on building, and every 8-bar loop, something new is happening. And that's it. I hope you liked the video, and I hope to see you soon in the next Abstrakt video next week. Ciao.